And then I'd love to begin by saying today we have 90 minutes. So I'd like to give a little bit more time to a longer presentation so that we can create a shared context together. And for those like Gail who may have to leave early, there will be a recording that will be posted. Thank you, Gail. And the reason that I want to be sure and take plenty of time today is that this is the first Barichara updates session. And that means there's more backstory to tell. Whereas in the future, we can send people to this one or send people to other recorded sessions so that they don't have to get this full update. And since some of you know a lot about what's going on here, it'll look familiar. And some of you know parts of what's going on here and may be confused about what all the parts are. And then some of you may be new and not know how much is going on and how interesting this moment is in the work that's happening in Barichara, Colombia, and how it relates to the Earth Regenerators Network. But what I really want to do today is start by giving this larger context so that we have a shared place from which to clarify questions that people have, to address some of the complexities of storytelling, of why it's hard to track all that's going on, even for those who are trying to, and also to bridge three worlds. One world is the members of Earth Regenerators who have been helping to manifest a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But while helping to manifest it, many of them also don't know what's happening because they're not here on the ground. And then there's a second community, which is the people who are here in Barichara, some of whom have only been here for a week or two, some of whom have been here longer, that have partial or larger parts of the story of what's happening here. And then also there are those who have joined us because we started a pledge drive and we've started a Gofundme campaign. And there's some people that are starting to arrive from other networks and other communities. They may not really know what's going on here. And so what I want to try and do is bridge these three realms of entry, these places where people are entering from different backgrounds, by trying to tell one story that brings us up to speed, at least in general, on what has been happening since this guy right here arrived in Barichara 2.5 years ago. And you'll see that the story I'm going to tell is really going to be the story I can tell, which is that I'm not going to tell you about the 30 existing regenerative projects that were here before I arrived and their long histories, some of which I know and some of which I don't, because I just don't want to take the time to fill that full backstory. But I want to begin by acknowledging that everything you're about to see is only possible because I arrived into a very full territory with a lot of stuff that was already happening, most of it developed by local people for a long time before I arrived. And so the key thing I want to say is that I arrived into a space that was pregnant for integration, a place where the possibility of connecting many of those projects was very present. And so a lot of what you're going to see is what happens when a bioregional catalyst, for people like Benji, when a bioregional catalyst arrives on the scene and is able to build good relationships and form friendships with people and start to create dynamic patterns that catalyze and transform what is already present. And so with that said, I'd love to begin by just saying, I want to share this presentation. And then afterwards, the recording will be shared on Earth Regenerators under the tag Barichara, and also below the event announcement for today's session. So you can go to either place to find the recording and share it with friends. And that after this presentation portion, I would love to have a really interactive conversation where we can talk about what we've seen, what questions we have, how to move forward. And I think you're going to see that this is a very special moment where this work that's happening here in the northern Andes of Colombia has planetary significance. And it's something that can really become a place and a set of frameworks for learning about other bioregions, as we're already connecting to places like the Gulf of Maine, to the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, to a new project in a fishing community in Ecuador that just arrived to us, thanks to Natalie who's here, and many other locations on Earth where some of you are already working. And so with that said, I'd love to begin the presentation part of the conversation. Okay.
Hey, Joe, I just noticed there's a lot of people with unmuted microphones. I don't know if you want to go ahead and do a mute all to make sure they're silenced.
Okay, done. Good suggestion, thank you. And then here we go. To begin, these are a lot of my friends. Some of them, like Alpha, who's standing up there in the back, are on this call. And others, like Ceci down here on the front and the right, is a close connection of someone on the call. What I want to begin with is by saying that we're going to have these Barichara updates every week on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central Time US. And I'll explain more of what's happening in this image when we get further along in the story. But I just want you to know that while I may be the host welcoming you today, there actually are a lot of people, some of whom have joined us today, that can share more of the story than I'm going to share. And over time, we'll invite more members of the community here in Barichara, the local people who are bilingual that can speak English, and at times we may even arrange translations from Spanish to English to help us tell the fuller story. And what I want to begin by saying is that we have a very clear articulation of what we're trying to do. We're trying to birth a regenerative bioregion. For those who don't know what a bioregion is, a bioregion is the entire geographic context in which an organism and its biological population is able to create their entire sustainable livelihood. And so for humans, a bioregion is an area of landscape at a territorial scale that enables a local living economy or an extended trade network that is able to support a complex human society over an extended period of time. So when we're talking about creating a regenerative bioregion, what we're really talking about is trying to create an economic system and human culture that's able to function at the scale of a landscape or of a territory. And in our case, the territory has a scale of about 500,000 hectares, for those who know what a hectare is, or about 500 square miles. And so to begin with, that's Barichara, that's here in front. See this little village with some mountains and valleys. And this photo was taken from Bioparque Moncora, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment. But for those who don't know where Barichara is, it's right here in what I like to call the Great Turn of the Northern Andes, where the Andes go from south to northeast, and then they make a sharp turn to the left to become Panama and Costa Rica. And the Andes have this turn where we're located, where there actually are 3 mountain ranges. And then the 3 mountain ranges where the Andes have separated, there's a series of canyons and river valleys, and we're located right in the middle of those. And so we're fairly close to Venezuela. To our east are drainages from some of the largest rivers of the Amazon basin. To our west is the Pacific Ocean, and to our north is the Caribbean Sea. And I just want you to have a bit of context that this is a place that was a major point of connection and intercultural exchange between the native peoples of North America, Central America, and South America, going back about 14,000 years. And specifically in the region where we are, there are pictographs in the canyons that go back at least 7,000 years. So this is a place with a long history of human habitation, an incredibly rich cultural history, and with a very unique ecosystem. We live in a place that has a tropical dry forest, which there are many tropical dry forests on Earth, but we're the only high Andes tropical dry forest on Earth, which is a mix of Andean kind of mountain tropical rainforest and cloud forest mixed together with desert ecosystems of the canyons below. And so we live in a place that is very, very special and that has a lot to offer in showing how to create territorial processes for landscape regeneration. We're going to talk today a lot about the Barichara ecoversity and what an ecoversity is. But what I want to begin doing is just sharing with you that we are in the process of completing the purchase of a piece of land that is called Las Albercas. Las Albercas is Spanish for the pools of water. It's actually an old Arabic word. And this land, that's 10 hectares of land, is where we intend to place a learning center and to begin a process of watershed restoration and reforestation, and to connect many different projects that exist within the territory. Among those projects are a project called Orihindalagua that is up here at the top of this ridge line that we crowdfunded money about 1.5 years ago to be able to purchase this piece of land and begin a restoration process. Also, there's Bioparque Moncora, which is over here. And this is a community project started in 2009 by two lovely women named Camila and Vicky, and has been connected to the community in many ways ever since. And also there are several reforestation projects in these areas being developed by some of our neighbors. And so this piece of land, the Barichara Ecoversity, is directly connected to about 40 hectares of reforestation work that's underway right now. And it's connected to surface water drainage of a dead stream, as well as an aquifer system of underground water that's in the ridgeline above. And we'll see a little bit more of that from another perspective. This is the land Orihindalagua that we purchased last year and completed the purchase in April of 2021. This land, as you can see, is heavily eroded and degraded. It's on about 3 hectares of land. And at the bottom of it, these buildings you can see in the lower right are a countryside school, a rural school, part of the village of Villanueva. So we have the opportunity to develop education programs with the children of the countryside by doing reforestation work on this land. And I just wanted you to see it, to both see how beautiful it is and to see how scarred and degraded it was when we began. We began the work in April of last year, and already we can see differences. Although we haven't gone back to take drone footages from these angles again to track our progress, we'll have those photos to share in the near future. And another thing I want to say is that we had a project started in the Bioparque, which is this 14-year-old reforestation project on community land. And you can see what can be done in the span of less than a year. These two photos are 10 months apart. This is when we started creating a bosque comestible, or a food forest. So in July of last year, we started digging the first retention pond. And by May of this year, you can see that it's been utterly transformed with a diversity of vegetation and bushes, shrubs, and plants that have various beneficial uses. Things that can be used for food, for medicine, and for weaving to make clothing and baskets, all of which have been planted in the last year and that are beginning to transform the landscape very quickly. Here you can see those two pieces of land with this blue arrow. The part of the arrow that's above is where Orihindalagua is, and the arrow below is where Bioparque Moncora is. What I want you to notice is there's an aquifer system. The village of Barichara has been placed here above the river that is drawn in the white lines, which is the Barichara River. It was able to be settled above because there's an underground water supply. And for hundreds of years, the people of this village got all of their water from wells because the groundwater supply was the primary source of water. Unfortunately, in the 1990s, a privatization scheme was started to dam the Barichara River, thus killing it. At this point, there's only a trickle of water that falls off the waterfall at the bottom of this drainage that has at least 15 tributaries. And this river, which spans about 40,000 hectares of drainage and only has a trickle of water at the bottom, and all of that water is thoroughly contaminated. You can't fish in it, you can't swim in it. If you touch it, you might get a rash. Children who play in it get sick. This is a place where there's a dead river system that was partly killed to pump the water up to Barichara while damaging and contaminating the aquifer system above. And so a lot of our work is around the reforestation, because you can also see the scars in the land. All of this was forest until about 80 years ago. And between 80 years ago and about 20 years ago, there were several stages of monoculture agriculture, where they cut down the forest to grow beans and squash, yucca, tobacco, and then later provided it for grazing of cows and goats. And so a lot of our work is around the reforestation of this landscape. But I want you to just start seeing that our projects are strategically located in the landscape in ways that can start to focus on ridgelines and aquifers, drainage basins of entire rivers, and biological corridors of connectivity across the land. This is a graphic I created more than a year ago, actually almost 2 years ago. And so it's actually outdated. For example, it says Solidarity Network of 10 fincas. Fincas are a local word for farms. There actually are 14 of them. All I want you to see here is that when you look at the plateau that Barichara is located on, you'll see that it's mostly yellow and brown, and it's not green, because most of it's been thoroughly deforested. The unique tropical dry forest of this region has been cut down by about 95% of the surface area of the land. So 95% of the original forest is gone. But what I want you to see is that even before I arrived, there was a very large diversity of projects spread across the territory. Lots of private land where people are doing reforestation and they set up private nature reserves, various kinds of forest schools or schools for cultural preservation of local knowledge. The community park here is the project for Bioparque Moncora. Projects where people are trying to put surface vegetation back on the land to help clouds form and bring back fog and rain. And these 10 fincas, which is actually 14, is a network of regenerative agroforestry that goes back about 8 years now, led by some wonderful local social entrepreneurs and managed by a lot of local campesino farmers. I just wanted you to see this to know that I'm alluding to a bigger story. I don't want to name all of the projects in the territory that existed before I arrived, but I want you to know that they were here and that I arrived into this very high potential landscape for creating connections between them. And now I want to start telling the story of what happened when my family arrived in November of 2019, and in December of 2020, a year later, we were able to begin a series of processes that have had transformational effects. One of those things is that we raised $50,000 in the Earth Regenerators Network, and we created the Barichara Regeneration Fund. This led to the purchase of the land Orihindalagua that I just showed you a moment ago, and also supported 15 local projects because we created a local advisory council representing a variety of existing projects. So there was money given to the Bioparque, there was money given to local composting in restaurants, there was money set aside for creating education programs about local ecology in the schools for elementary students, and quite a lot more that came into being during the year 2020. Then in 2021, we started to negotiate the purchase of Las Albercas, and we raised money in several different stages. So this $120,000 includes some money that was set aside to purchase Las Albercas, some money that we used to fund a local social entrepreneur named Margarita to be able to turn her home into a learning center and begin a process of transforming the local food system based on previous work she'd already been doing. And also to do some other things that we'll see with Syntropic Agroforestry that we started to do about 6 weeks ago. So this is the lumping together of a few pools of money from different kinds of crowdfunding that we've done in the last year. This gave rise to 3 learning centers, 2 of which are active and functioning, and the other one which is in the process of being formed. First of all, the work on the transformation of local food systems and the healing of cultural traumas, led by a woman named Margarita, who's been doing this work for about 7 or 8 years now in the community. Another is to create a project in Syntropic Agroforestry, where we created our first workshop about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And it was so successful that we very quickly raised the money to create 6 months of focused work, to turn it into a learning center, to spread Syntropic Agroforestry across the territory, and also to create connections to other territories and make this a nationally focused learning center for all of Colombia. And you'll see when we go through some photos of what's been happening that a lot of dynamic things have occurred in the last 6 weeks. And then a third is that we're beginning to create an independent youth media center, building on existing work of 2 local leaders named Emilce and Oscar, and a wonderful young man named Guillermo, who does work in film production and like visual editing and storytelling, that's been volunteering his time and helping to document a lot of our work in the last 2 months, that we're now beginning to form a process of how to educate young people and give them the tools they need to do interviews, to run podcasts, to create documentaries, so that we can start to have local voices and local perspectives about the challenges and the beautiful solutions that are arising in the territory. But then this work it's continuing from now, or basically a month ago, when we began fundraising for $150,000 to establish the Barichara Ecoversity. This is going to allow us to complete the purchase of Las Albercas, because we still have a step to take. We've created something, sort of a purchase agreement, have money that is planning to arrive for Las Albercas to help us finish this, the purchase of that land. And then we're going to begin an off-grid design of the campus so that it's net zero energy and net zero water to demonstrate ecological design of buildings, while also initiating a process of reforestation, a series of watershed councils, and work to restore entire watersheds. And this is where the territorial regeneration begins in a coherent way. As you can see with the existing projects, it's actually been underway for 15 or 20 years. And really, the oldest project I know about in the territory is a 28-hectare private nature reserve. So that was started about 30 years ago. So in some ways, territorial regeneration began about 30 years ago. But having it be consciously and visibly territorial in scale is what's happening right now. And that's partly because we've received other kinds of support, like a fellowship from the Cello Company, which is enabling me to bring people in, some earth regenerators who are helping us to map out watersheds, people like Charles Upton and Chad Manfreda, who are helping us to analyze and reveal different economic models that are based in the commons and how to do watershed restoration. And also, just in the last month, we've begun receiving recurring micro donations from EcoStake at the level of $500 to $1,000 per month from cryptocurrency that we're starting to put into our active projects to sustain us as we move forward. And all of this is being embedded into the formation of a territorial foundation, which is work that began about a year ago. And I'll show you a little bit of our work on that in a few moments. But the idea of this territorial foundation is that it becomes almost like the global brain of our bioregion, enabling us to do a lot of things, enabling us to coordinate the existing community councils and to create more, to begin watershed restoration, building on existing work and starting it in new parts of the territory, creating knowledge inventories of local plants, of methods and techniques for reforestation and for watershed restoration, to form networks of forest reserves, some of which exist, some of which will be new, to eventually create a food processing center based on some of the existing work, to create a network of agroforestry field sites from the work that's happening with Syntropic Agroforestry, and generally speaking, to create coherent patterns of regenerative education across the entire territory, which means the Territorial Foundation will support the Barichara ecoversity, while that educational focus will be the mission of the ecoversity itself. I just want you to know that as all of this is starting to take off, we've been fundraising to enable this work to happen and for it to continue for an extended period of time. And embedded in all of this is Earth Regenerators, that beginning in December of 2019, or more or less January 1st of 2020, the global platform Earth Regenerators was formed. And I won't tell the story of Earth Regenerators here, although there is a short video that I produced to give a summary of it that you can find by typing in History of Earth Regenerators. You'll find it on YouTube. But just to let you know that the reason we've been able to raise money, to be able to bring in external expertise, to be able to form these relationships between the outside world while cultivating local governance and local leadership, is because the Earth Regenerators platform has perpetually been both helping to create this and has been created from this. As much of the inspiration, much of the engagement, much of the onward motion of Earth Regenerators has been stimulated and sustained by the inspiration of what's happening in Barichara. And there's a very powerful, multifaceted story to tell about this complex relationship. What we've been doing in the last 2 weeks, and this is something very new, is we're starting to create a regenerative trust for the Barichara ecoversity. And we have $75,000 matched by 2 donors who are helping us to complete the purchase of Las Albercas and to start doing work with the Learning Center in Syntropic Agroforestry that would like to place their donations in a context of supporting more capacity. So we started inviting people to make individual pledges of $1,000 to match the $75,000, meaning we're looking for 75 new pledges. And what's interesting about this is the pledge has an amount of $1,000 as just a clear unit to say, if you agree to try to raise $1,000, you can bring it in yourself as a single gift from one person, or you can gather with your friends and pool money and do it together. And from these pledges, we're starting to create a pledge community of people who are going to help design ways of creating together and helping hold this very delicate and very important relationship between the decision-making of what happens locally in Barichara, which as much as possible, we want the sovereignty to remain within the territory with local leaders, and the relationship to many different networks in other places. Groups like Common Land Foundation and their network of projects, or Regen Network, which is working at a planetary scale, or the other networks of bioregional projects that are emerging within Earth Regenerators. That we want to have really powerful, held and facilitated relationships. And this pledge community is going to help us learn how to do that. And like I said, we're creating 3 learning centers, some of which already exist and some of which are taking form, but they're continually evolving as we speak. One of those is the transformation of local food systems, which really can be understood by realizing there are 2 existing networks that have lived here for a long time. One of them is a local organization called Terra Innova, which translates into English as Innovative Earth. Terra Innova helped form a network of 14 regenerative agroforestry projects where they teach composting and biochar, watershed retention, have created solidarity networks, formed a nonprofit cooperative, and then later transitioned into a for-profit B Corp or benefit corporation. And another one is called Fundación Mujer y Vida, which is a network of 47 families led by women in the local countryside who have been trying to cultivate the preservation of cultural knowledge and food resilience for their families going back to the mid-1990s. And as we're working with the transformation of local food systems, we're able to collaborate deeply with these 2 networks of people and their projects to build up a learning center that has coherence and forward motion from where we are at present. The second is Syntropic Agroforestry, which is a powerful model of reforestation to create food forests, developed by a Swiss botanist named Ernst Gosch, which is a model of agroforestry that started about 45 years ago in Brazil and has now proven itself to be one of the most effective ways to quickly grow forests that have very diverse beneficial uses for humans. And we have been mapping out places to give future workshops, forming networks of local projects among participants in our workshops, creating knowledge inventories of local plants and techniques, developing clear frameworks of communication to share what's being learned, creating networks of learning within people's private land who participate in these workshops so that they can come together and collaborate, sort of local versions of barn warming, but what's called in Colombia mingas, but it's basically neighbors coming together to help each other with their land. And all of this is very quickly taking form, as you'll see in a moment when I share some photos of what's been happening. And then together with this is this need for an independent youth media center. And what I want to share briefly is that our friends Emilce and Oscar, who have been doing work in the territory for a long time, have been training children from about the age of 8 up to the age of 15, how to do photography, interviews, documentary filmmaking. And there are currently 2 teams of 15-year-old kids who have been actively producing their own documentaries for more than a year. And we're going to be working with this deep capacity that they have been developing in the rural schools to create an independent youth media center to document and do storytelling around all of the projects spread across these families and networks of reforestation projects. And you can see that all 3 of these learning centers are deeply connected to each other, and that the idea of an ecoversity is not to have a single learning center, but to have an ecosystem of all of the learning that's taking place, where that ecosystem has coherence at the scale of the bioregion. And so the ecoversity is going to have a location on Las Albercas, but the transformation of local food systems is in the house of our friend Margarita. Syntropic Agroforestry has a local team, but doesn't have a place. Its primary field site is in Bioparque Moncora. The Independent Youth Media Center does not yet currently have a location, but there are 2 rural schools where they've been doing the work for several years. And so one of the goals after raising money will be to secure a location and provide the equipment and ongoing training of youth to be able to document the stories that are important to them. And they will then go out and track what's happening in the transformation of local food systems, the spreading of Syntropic Agroforestry. And you can see all these learning centers are connected in a network. That's because we really have 4 key capacities that are enabling all of this to occur. One of them is that there's an existing portfolio of local projects, as well as new ones taking form. Now we're creating a bioregional learning center, which is this coherence across the network of existing learning activities at the bioregional scale. That we're creating a territorial foundation, which is a community-based foundation that's meant to serve the entire territory. And I'll explain a little bit more about that model in a moment. And then the 4th capacity is to be pro-social, to be able to collaborate, to have trust and generosity, to have transparency and openness, to have the ability to form effective teams, for those teams to be able to work together in coherent ways. And these four together, to have bioregional learning at an ecosystem scale, portfolios of local projects, a territorial foundation that can mobilize resources across all those projects and support the coherence of learning, all enabled by pro-social abilities to work in groups, to work in small local groups. All of these together are what we're prototyping as a way of creating regenerative economies for other places on Earth. And we think other places have a lot to learn from what we're doing here. I want to speak briefly about the Territorial Foundation and say that one of the big challenges with philanthropy is that most philanthropy is the result of colonial wealth extraction and domination by people who have exploited and destroyed large parts of the earth. And then they create foundations as what are basically tax havens. And then they control how the money is spent to serve their own agendas. Yes, I'm talking about Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation here, and many, many other examples like them. So the key thing is that the local community needs to have its own sovereignty, its own ability to make decisions. So they need to maintain a boundary or a membrane with the outside world that doesn't allow those colonial extractive influences to enter. So here you can see there's a boundary, and the only entity touching the boundary is the Territorial Foundation. It's like a castle with a moat and a drawbridge, that the Territorial Foundation can open the door and allow resources in, but only if those resources are decolonized to enable the local community to maintain its sovereignty. So this is like a gatekeeper of sovereignty for the territory. And the Territorial Foundation's job is simply to mobilize resources and to help maintain coherence of the territorial processes. The way we're doing this is by setting up a wisdom council of local people who have regenerative projects, who understand very well the local culture, its history, have very good trust-based relationships with local people, and that can represent and honor this protection of the local community from the power of the outside world. But then the Territorial Foundation does not do any work. It does not take any action on the ground because it needs to be neutral with respect to local actors and local organizations. What this means is that different thematic groups will form, and the Territorial Foundation will set up separate funds for each of them. So there might be a group that focuses on water. There might be a group that focuses on reforestation. There might be a group that focuses on youth education. The community will create groups. They'll come and go. Some groups will last for a long time. Some will only exist for one event or one moment. And there'll be a wisdom council that represents the different groups and that is looking at and holding care for the entire territory. And so this Territorial Foundation is not the same thing as the ecoversity, but it's what's going to enable the ecoversity to have coherence. Because perhaps one of these thematic groups is regenerative education, and the Territorial Foundation is providing funding to the ecoversity, but the ecoversity has its own group, makes its own decisions, plans and implements its own projects, independent of the Territorial Foundation, which is simply creating coherence between the ecoversity and other groups. And this is how we're able to start mobilizing external resources in the way that we have. And I want to share something that may have been confusing to a few of you as we're just learning how to raise money and do this work, is that a few weeks ago, we created a Gofundme campaign. That was this image on the right, birthing of regenerative bioregions. And then later, we started a pledge campaign for creating a regenerative trust. And what's interesting is that the Gofundme campaign allows you to bring any amount of money. You could donate $5. You could donate 5,000. It's through a Gofundme campaign. But if you want to participate in this governance process of ecoversity, we would really like to have people with a deeper commitment to either providing $1,000 or raising it within their group of friends, so that they together can participate in the governance of the ecoversity's relationship to the outside world. And in the last few weeks, we've received 11 pledges, which means $11,000 in support coming in through the pledge drive. In about 10 days, this has happened. And during the last 2-3 weeks, we've received about $3,000 in small gifts through the Gofundme campaign, which means that we've raised about $14,000 in total. That is part of the $75,000 that we're trying to raise from the pledge drive. And so I just want you to see that there may be confusion for those of you who have seen one part of this activity and not another, that we started fundraising in a normal crowdfunding model and then created a larger and more ambitious model with the pledge drive. And both of them are running simultaneously, but they actually give people a diversity of choices for how they can participate. And one thing that's not shown here is that we have fiscal sponsorship from an organization called Possible Planet. I know Jonathan Cloud is here on the call with us representing Possible Planet, and that those who want to give larger gifts and receive tax deductions in the United States can actually do that as another option as well. So really, we're just creating a portfolio of ways that people can support the portfolio of projects that are rising and integrating within the bioregional territory of Barichara. Now what I want to do is shift modes and start to show you some pictures of what's been happening. All of the pictures I'm about to share are within the last 6 weeks. And I'm just going to give you a slice of what's happening because it's so profound. This is a photo from our first Syntropic Agroforestry workshop. That lovely man in the black shirt in the front is Paco, who is a Colombian man who went to Brazil and learned Syntropic Agroforestry and came back and is now spreading it across Colombia. And we've been able to recruit him to the territory to help build the learning center here so that we can have an anchor of capacity to create sustained relationships with other territories in Colombia. And so the first day of this 3-day workshop was held as a classroom. People gathered in the learning center at Margarita's house, the Learning Center for Transforming Local Food Systems, and we began exploring what is Syntropic Agroforestry and how does it work. But then on the second and third days, we went to the Bioparque to implement what we were learning and to learn with our hands. And so here we are the next day with about 30 participants starting to learn how to apply these concepts to the design of a very beautiful agroforestry model. And in 2 days, we managed to plant about 6,000 plants. Some of them, like these nopal cacti, are in the form of baby plants. Most of them were diversity of seeds, and most of the seeds were native plants. And what you can see is that as people came to the Bioparque and started digging the trenches, planting the plants, learning in practice how this works, that we were also establishing a laboratory, a field research station, a place where we can come back and study how does this system work for our unique culture and our unique ecology. And so a lot of us were there doing the work, preparing the land, planting and structuring what would become an agroforestry model for us to learn from for the entire territory. And we were learning techniques for mulching, we were learning techniques for pruning, we were learning techniques for planting, we were learning how to design for the composition of plants to strategically plant them in the way that Syntropy works. And in the same time, what was happening to the plants was happening to the humans. We began to weave ourselves together in shared purpose and shared agenda, in friendships and relationships, continuing the work together. Which was related to this other work where we've hosted a series of workshops about the Territorial Foundation. And this is overlapping people. Some of the same people are involved in both activities. Here you can see in one of our workshops, we're mapping people and their needs to be able to clarify the priorities and the necessities, the opportunities for a Territorial Foundation to function. And then as we sat in community and shared our ideas with each other, we found a deep resonance and a deep harmony within the hearts of each of us. And we felt deeply the sense of community as we began doing this work together. So not only were we creating harmonious relationships between plants and the soil, we were creating the same kinds of harmonious relationships with the people in the community doing this work. And that's how we could learn how to listen to the land, what it says here, escuchar el territorio y desarrollo endógeno, those phrases in English, how to listen to the territory, how to develop endogenously, how to develop from local capacities, how to articulate and integrate what is present to create a new identity and develop a cultural light that is healthy and holistic healing processes for the entire territory. And as these projects are going on, we're still planting trees in the Bioparque. There are lots of people on their own land planting things, maintaining them, improving them, The people who participated in the first workshop started doing site visits to each other's land to share what they were planting and watch the progress, like a network of local gardens where they're forest gardens, all learning together. And something changed in the bioparque. For those of you who know the story, I spent a year in this food forest almost completely alone. And now I can't get a moment of quiet to save my life because people keep showing up. They just gather unexpectedly, just arriving, their cars pull up on the road, they pile out of their cars, and they come walking up to the village, and they ask for a tour, and they want to get involved. And the energy and dynamism is completely different. It's just incredible how much engagement there is. And you can see my daughter Elise annoyed that she wants time with her daddy while all the community members are showing up. Everyone else is looking pretty happy to be here. And Elise has got her hand on her hip like, come on, daddy, play with me. Because this is how rapid and how unexpected this change has been. And it's like every day, different groups of people. Here's a mixture of earth regenerators. For those of you who know them, earth regenerators on your left, there's Alpha. Back in the center is Kathy and Chad. There's Penny, there's Charles. And then mixed in with them is some people that Penny and I met in the morning at a local cafe having breakfast who had heard about what we were doing and wanted to come visit. It's like we can't escape. The popularity of the story is out. Pandora's box has been opened. Something different is happening, and we have a responsibility to continue all of this work. Meanwhile, as the earth regenerators from outside have started gathering, we go and walk the land. Like here we are, this is the land Las Albercas, where we want to place the Ecoversities Learning Center. And we're out walking the land, learning how to restore the river that's in the drainage above and connecting with each other in conversation. And as we walk the land, I realize that even if I only invite 6 people, it's not surprising if 30 people show up, which is what happened on this day. And as we're all walking the land together, you could just feel the connection. All of our projects that different neighbors have, feeling like they're part of something bigger. The people arriving from the outside, feeling like they're entering into a space where they've already helped because of the crowdfunding we've done and the learning we've shared in Earth Regenerators. And as individual earth regenerators arrive, here's Chad on the left and Charles on the right, they're able to immediately roll up their sleeves and get to work, helping us in the bioparque, going and visiting other people's projects, and just coming to observe and share what they've been learning. And many of these lovely people have started sharing their stories on earth regenerators to try to capture the complexity and the nuance of what's happening here, because it's just too much to take in for an individual person. We need multiple perspectives just to understand it. And so that's why this happens. All of these lovely earth regenerators, there's Paula on the left, who I believe is here on the call with us still. And then our other lovely friends, that's Jacob back in the center, and Kathy and Penny to his to the left of the image, and Alpha, Chad, and Charles to the right. And we're all just gathering. In this case, they're holding up Charles's recording information as they're creating a podcast for earth regenerators and learning how they can share what's happening here with the rest of the world. Thing I want you to notice is the smiles. This is something beautiful. We are weaving together friendships that we hope will last a lifetime. And this connection between what is locally happening and its relevance to the rest of the world is so present in the hearts of everyone who comes here. They can just feel that others need to learn, which is why they immediately got started on a podcast and they started writing blog articles. Like, we have to tell this story and we have to tell it to understand it. In the meantime, here are Juanita and Paul, 2 lovely local people who have a very spiritual connection to the need for ceremony and ritual. And they came to the bioparque one day and asked if they could create a ceremony for Gaia, or as the locals in the Andes might say, Pachamama, the Mother Earth energy of the planet, could give her blessings to what is happening here. And there's only one possible answer I could give to that was, thank you and please. This is in the place where they were planting some sacred plants to begin connecting to the deep sacred relationships they have with these plants as people who hold ceremony and the work that's happening in the bioparque. And then a week later, they came back and started clearing this space. This is a place where a fire was started about a month and a half ago, where someone came and committed acts of arson and tried to burn down parts of the bioparque, attacking and hurting this beautiful place. So we decided to enter into the place of pain and create healing. So we started clearing the ground to create a ceremonial site. Here's the land about 2 days in to creating the space. Our first ritual is likely to be on the full moon next week. We're starting to organize a series of events to have ceremonies around cacao, the sacred chocolate seed, and other plants that people of South America have held sacred for thousands of years, to honor this place, to bring the blessings of Gaia and Pachamama, and to help connect the community to their feelings of the sacred in the bioparque. Meanwhile, in the last 2 weeks, while Paco had returned to give teach-ins on Syntropic Agroforestry, we created an incredible schedule. Tanya, who is here, could tell you how exhausting it is after 2 weeks. Poor Paco, who did this work, finally getting a moment's break. In 2 weeks, they had him do 1 or 2, and usually 2, site visits each day, where they invited the 30 participants of the first workshop to come to each other's land to learn techniques for how to improve their projects and to share with each other everything they were learning. So imagine in 2 weeks, there was something like 10 or 12 or 15, Tanya could maybe tell us the actual number, of field site visits that ended yesterday in the afternoon because Paco is leaving this morning. And during these 2 weeks, what we did was we created a network of places where people are practicing together. And we solidified a learning community of people learning Syntropic Agroforestry together. All the while, people like Tanya and Ceci systematizing the learnings so that we can improve the workshops and replicate this kind of learning in other territories throughout Colombia. And this work has been taking place for the last 2 weeks with an intensity that is sort of dizzying and overwhelming. Meanwhile, the Earth Regenerators who are here have been going on their own field site visits. Here they are at a place called Agua Santa, just Spanish for holy water. Here on our left is Maritza, and there in the center is Carlos, an amazing couple who have been doing the work on this land. And what you can see on the right of this image is a giant compost pile, and all of those black tanks in the back are the different microorganism soups that they use to rapidly turn green compost or cuttings and clippings from all of the coffee plantations where shade-grown coffee is grown, to turn it into high-quality compost and accelerate the building of soils. Here's a picture of our friend Oswaldo, a local biologist who's an expert with birds and their relationship to plants, and he has a lot of experience with reforestation. And on the right are a group of Earth Regenerators. There's Charles in the back, Merritt in front of him, and then Paula and Penny. And they're all listening to him talk about the relationship between that native vanilla orchid that he's rescuing to transplant that's in his hand, and explaining its relationship to the cloud forest that's to our west, and the fact that orchids exist right alongside cactus in this incredibly unique and diverse ecosystem, the high Andes tropical dry forest. And this is during a walk to visit Orihindalagua. And again, this beautiful photo. This was a work party where participants from the first workshop came back to learn maintenance. How do you maintain and improve the project that we planted a month earlier? And I just want you to notice those smiles, they're genuine. They really felt that way. It was incredible to be in this space. Personally, I had actually had a really stressful day and something pretty difficult had happened for me just before arriving. And then I showed up to this. And in this place of having my body jarred and my emotions stressed, I immediately felt at ease, got to work pulling grass and helping maintain the system. And I was healed as much as the land. And you can just feel it. You can feel how the children are there. There's Felipe with his daughter Vera on his back. You can see how our Earth Regenerators friends like Alpha are there working alongside the local people of the community. We're all blending together. The woman in the back with the red hair is Vicky, one of the founders of the bioparque and one of our most cherished elders in the community. And we're all there together, multiple generations, people from different backgrounds, all kneeling side by side and touching the same earth. It's difficult to describe how profound this is to feel for those of us from places like the United States, where there's so much individualism and community is so broken. This feeling of community is palpable and it's healing. It's deeply human and it's largely alien for most of us from the outside. And I feel like one of the most important things Barichara has to teach is how to just be present and be in community while connecting with the land in exactly this way. So here you can see on the same day with the work party, multiple people doing their work. Paco's there in the background helping. He's just doing a little maintenance himself after teaching some people the techniques. And this lovely woman in white on the right is Camila, the other co-founder of the Bioparque, another cherished elder of our community. And notice she's got her gloves on and she's working right there with us. So this is a place where the elders and the children come together in the Bioparque. It's absolutely spectacular. And as this work has been growing, the field sites together with the work parties, together with the site visits, together with the people from the outside coming to share their knowledge, together with the formation of learning centers, it's kind of overwhelming how much is happening. And then we had other workshops for the Territorial Foundation. Here are Jose and Felipe facilitating a session, where in this case, we mapped out the abundance of human capacities that exist among those of us establishing the foundation, as we offered our gifts into little baskets that were the harvest of community support from those of us who realize we don't need to bring in outside resources to create the foundation because we have so much local capacity. And yet the resources from the outside will allow us to sustain, amplify, and share what we're doing locally with the rest of the world. And I want to just stop here. This whirlwind. Take a pause. This is a moment where I had a little 5 minutes of tranquility after weeks and weeks of intense schedules myself, where I got to go to the Bioparque alone with my daughter, and we planted fique. Fique is an agave plant that is sacred to the indigenous Guane people, and it's used for textiles, to make clothing, to make rope, to make baskets. And here's Elise placing one of the fiques into the ground, planting it herself right next to a cactus that we had just planted before. And I want you to know that as we do this work, there's this connection to future generations that allows us to find a calm in the midst of the storm. And so I just want you to know that as this work is happening, it's happening at all levels for all of us who are here. And everyone who's here, many who are on this call, can give their own testimonials to what it's like to be in this whirlwind of activities. But at least we can take these little moments to remember what's really important and why these little moments like this are going to help carry us forward through the ambitious work that we still have to do. So with that said, I'd love to have a conversation, to answer any questions you might have, to clarify things, to invite those who are here to share some of their stories, and for us to learn together how we can take the next steps. So, like I said, I wanted to cover this story in a broad way to just start giving us a bit of shared context. There is a lot that I have left out. There's no way I could tell it all. And so I want to give special invitation to those who are here in Barichara to share in ways that you would like. So if anyone here from the Earth Regenerators community that's in Barichara would like to share, and also to answer any questions that people have and to start clarifying what is going on and how we can move forward. And if you could use the reaction button on the bottom to raise your hand, since there are about 25 of us here, that might be helpful for us to have a conversation. So storytelling for those who are here that might like to share, and questions that people have that they might like to have answered. David, please, and welcome.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, do you have any interest in, or have you already looked at any archaeological and ethnological survey that's already been done by the Columbian Museum of this territory to look at the long-term archaeological history of the bioregion?
We have, and the way that we have is that firstly, there is a school that, well, I can't get to the view. Come on, computer. There we go. Which is that we have First of all, there's a museum for the Guane people that's in the village of Guane, which is a little village with about 150 or 200 people that's in the heart of their territory, which, while it's a small museum, is absolutely wonderful. Another thing is that about 7,000 pictograms and petroglyphs have been identified and mapped. And there are a lot of tombs that have been marked as archaeological sites. At the same time, it's an impressively unstudied history. It's sort of incredible how much ignorance there still is. And there's a woman named Monica Geidelman-Rice, who's a professor, she's an anthropologist at University of Santander, who started doing work. She's been working with archaeologists for about 10 years in a nearby site called Mesa de los Santos. And she's connected with one of the most preeminent archaeologists of South America, who is a world expert in Los Muiscas, which is the federated tribes that were centered around Bogota. And they're organizing for working with agronomists, archaeologists, climate scientists, and ecologists to reconstruct more of the cultural and ecological history of the territory. But it's sort of incredible how much is not known about this place. Because for those who don't know, there were two major civilizations, the Tairona to the north, made famous by the Kogi people who still live today, the Kogi and the Tairona, which live up near Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta on the Caribbean coast. Sometimes they're known as Big Brother, who brought the message to Little Brother, for those of you who know that story. And then there's the Muiscas, based in Bogota to the south, which had an extended trade network from roughly here all the way down to Ecuador. And the Muiscas existed for 3,500 years and are very well studied. The Tairona civilization is very well studied. This civilization in the canyons here is embarrassingly unstudied. And so there's a huge amount of work to be done. And I hope that we can draw attention to that. So thanks for the question, David. It's a really, really important one. Are there other questions or comments or things people might like to share? We're just taking it all in. Tyler, please.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That was really a lot of stuff going on there. It's very impressive. Very exciting too. I just wanted to kind of express maybe some of my concerns around the pledge community effort here. I just want to make sure that there aren't accidentally any sort of kind of negative systems or incentives being created through something like that, because I know inviting money in through, like, some sort of token that's only available to those who have money, and then if that token has some sort of social significance or social status associated with it, or you need to have the token to have to have any sort of say in the governance structure. I'm wondering if that's bringing in some sort of outside systems based on money in order to have any sort of political influence or influence in the group. And at the same time, I don't want to create I don't want to have any sort of, imagine in-group out-group dynamics between those who have the token and those who don't. And I'm very interested in this as well, these sort of kind of crypto token. I've been looking into this more myself. I feel like these sort of crypto systems have a lot of power to incentivize good action that benefits the public good, but at the same time can very easily be used to create the same kind of incentive structures that have led to a lot of the problems of our current society. So I just want to kind of raise that in the group and make sure that we're all kind of aware of these sort of things that are at play.
Yeah, no, Tyler, thank you for bringing this up, because I think this is extremely, extremely important. And one of the things that's been a clear principle for us with the Barichara Fund from its inception, which is now about 1.5 years old, is that money is allowed to come in from the outside, but only local people get to decide how the money is spent. And that was something that was really important when we prototyped the process with the first $50,000 that we raised. And what it does is it creates two kinds of governance. If we create this pledge community, we'll have two kinds of governance. We'll have governance of how money is spent within the community, which will be managed through the Territorial Foundation. And the foundation will have only representation from local people. which means we create a really clear boundary that those in the pledge community do not have any say about how the money is spent. And that's a strict ethical standard that is required, because otherwise what happens is money can so easily, even indirectly, influence sovereignty around economic development. And another thing I think is really important is the initial people joining the pledge community, some of whom are on this call, have been holding this exact tension that you're naming and are very concerned about it as well. And it feels very important that the initial people who begin to ask, how do we become representatives of the Barichara work to the rest of the world? That we want to be sure is that the seed kernel of culture, the first people, are people who really recognize what it means to create decolonized economic development. And that is a journey, right? It's not easy to say, what does it mean to do that? I'll just give you my 6 criteria and we're there. No, it's much more that we need to have a transparent way of holding these conversations. And what I think is really beautiful about creating a pledge community, but not having a token already designed, is one, the pledge community may decide not even to create a token. They may discuss it, find that its risks are too big, and just not create one. Or they may create one that's a physical object, but is not a digital object, so it's not in crypto. Or they may decide to create one, but give it very limited uses because they just want to experiment with how they can use it. One of the interesting things about creating a token is that it can become a type of community currency. And there are a lot of people who work with community currencies that have a lot that they've learned about how to use them. And so I think this blend of recognizing the power of these tools, just like you said, there's a lot of potential danger. And what I found is the best way to deal with these dangers is to create participatory dialogues around them. And so with the pledge community, what's already begun is that the first people to join are people who are really passionate about what we're doing and they really get it, which means that they're deeply aligned with the ethics of what we're doing. And the second round of people who are starting to come in now is their friends that they're inviting. Because people who don't know us very well, why would they come and give us money? Like they don't know the projects very well. And so we're initiating with a set of relationships that can start this seed kernel of dialogue. The questions around boundaries of inclusion and exclusion are both subtle and multifaceted, because one of the common misunderstandings about how commons work is the idea that everyone needs to be included, like to have consensus as the only way of making decisions as an example, which is sort of simplistic and naive, because sometimes there are other methods that are actually better, depending on the context. And what I found it's really powerful is the people who are really committed to seeing this happen are going to put some skin in the game, are going to step up and participate. And it's going to create a different dynamic of participation. So by having the level of participation be $1,000, but saying, you can actually raise the money with a group of friends. You don't need to be someone who's got that much spare cash. And the pledge community will actually help you raise it if you can't raise it on your own. So if you come in and say, well, I'd really like to raise $1,000 and I'm trying, and I've got 200 bucks of my own, found another friend that'll give 100, but I'm still 700 away. There might be someone else in the pledge community who can easily give 500 or 700 to help complete it. But they do this as a pro-social process. And so the key to this is really going to be facilitation, how the dialogue is facilitated. 2, who are the initial participants that help create the kernel of culture? And 3, that we create transparency around what's happening in the pledge community for those who aren't in it. But I actually feel it's really important to create this exclusivity or focused inclusivity, because what I found is that it's a way of addressing the free rider problem. It's a way of allowing those who want to co-create this to have a coherent way to participate with each other without being derailed by those who actually are just talking without being participants, without contributing to supporting, without taking some risk or making some investment of their own. And this difference is profound for long-term projects, that the people who help found and establish something need to be the ones who are more committed. And they need a way of protecting their process from those who are less committed, but they can interrupt it. And so I see this exclusivity having various risks and various strengths, but it needs to be explored in a dialogue. And so, so just to say, there's a lot more to talk about here. But I'm so glad that you brought this up. And I think having the challenge of managing these risks is going to help us to mature as a community as we grapple with these things together in the pledge community and just in general, as all of this stuff continues to move. And Midi, I see you have your hand up, so please, I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Joe. And thanks to Tyler, because I think he does raise something that is really key for us to explore. But first of all, I want to thank you, Joe. I really appreciated you setting your presentation in the context of 30 years of regenerative activity. What I've learned from living in many different places, interacting with many different groups, is that communities that are strong, networks that are strong, revere and honor their ancestors, and living ancestors can be as important as the ones who've passed into another dimension. In terms of what Tyler raises, I feel that we have an extraordinary opportunity as a community. And when I use the word community, I use it as an identified member of the Earth Regenerators network, and one who has been deeply committed to exploring and implementing ways of supporting Barichara ever since I came into the Earth Regenerator network a couple of years ago. I feel that we have, if we would articulate it now, a pretty strong sense of shared identity. That CDP1, that core design principle 1 that Ellen Ostrom speaks to. And I feel the opportunity we have now is to dig really deep into core design principle 2, which is, and I think you've been speaking to this, Joe, just now in your response to Tyler, equitable share of contributions and benefits. And also core design principle 3, fair and inclusive decision making. I think we can only get to inclusivity if we are clear about what are we excluding. We live in a dualistic universe here on planet Earth. And so to name inclusivity immediately constellates exclusivity. And it is grappling to me with the paradoxes inherent in these principles that we can actually move beyond where so many communities and networks have come very, very unstuck. So I feel that's what I'd like to share at this stage. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the fact that this is going to be an ongoing forum, as I understand it. And I don't know where and how, but I really would like to see us develop now the conversation around those 2 principles, core design principle 2 and core design principle 3, because I think it's more than timely. Thank you.
Just to say thank you, Midi. I completely agree, and that clarity is really helpful. Even more so for those who are unaware of how much work has gone into creating an Earth Regenerators Fund, which will be sort of like a sister to the Barichara Fund in some ways, and a mother in some ways, and a child in some ways, and a second cousin twice removed in some ways. And we just don't know yet because there's so many possible points of connection. Yes, Midi.
Actually, one of the things I loved most was to learn from the Arenda people in Central Australia, who've been my great teachers in Indigenous society in Australia, that as a grandmother, I'm also a granddaughter to somebody. And that's pretty key for me. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to sit with that one while I ask Stephen to share. That's just beautiful. Thank you, Midi.
Thanks, Joe. I'm still kind of like, I know there was a history before you were there, and I really appreciate you including that so that it isn't like, and so that when I talk about it, I can speak honestly about what's going on, and it's not some white guy from the States who showed up and suddenly there's all this stuff happening, that you're actually plugged into an existing indigenous network and brought something something to me that's very healing in the unification of North and South. The other thing I noticed that Tyler and Mitty brought up, and I feel particularly triggered about this, so I'm owning that up front, is a lot, what I sense, I couldn't point to evidence, but my sense is a lot of communities who have something like this want to be open and inclusive. And every community has to have a boundary, has to have a membrane, right? So I hear it being pointed to, but I want to name it explicitly, is that communities have an in-group and an out-group. That's what makes them communities. So it's the process of how do we decide who's in and who's out, and what do we consider fair? Sorry, but the outsiders don't get to decide what's the fair way in, the insiders, because it's our community. And my concern comes up immediately, which is also voiced in the other concerns, is we don't want people bringing a bunch of money and that buying their way in as insiders. And I hear you've got that foundation, but it's just useful for people to remember, we can't all love one each other and like drop all the boundaries. They are required. If there were no boundaries to the cells in my body, I'd be a blob of liquid or jello. So it's really important to like notice that urge to include everybody and then recognize everybody's not appropriate. And I'm as guilty as that as everyone else. So I'm also owning that, like, I want to include everybody, but we get somebody who's not appropriate. And I think those 8 principles are part of that. You know, what's the means by which someone is ejected if they're not appropriate, and how does someone even come in? And we've been fortunate up to this point, I think, from what you said when I first got introduced earlier in the year, is we filter out a large portion of people because we're operating inside of, we see the world collapsing. You know, and a lot of people don't even want to touch that conversation, so they're filtered out immediately. But there are other people who knows. So that's what I wanted to speak to.
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. I want to just name that one of the tensions that I think is going to continue existing in all of this work is this boundary between inclusivity and exclusivity, together with the healing processes each of us are on, the healing journeys each of us is on. Because one thing that I've seen happen already in the 2.5 years I've been in Barichara is, as I've been healed, the community has held me more. And as I've been healed, more of the community embraces me as a local. Just as a simple example, there's a word I heard one day. I went into like one of the tiendas. I was gonna like buy some cream for my coffee or something. And the person in the shop said, hola, Vici, ¿cómo estás? Like, Vici, what's that? Hola, Vici. Oh, vecino, neighbor. They went from calling me just, you know, not calling me anything to calling me neighbor. And it's such a little thing, and it's such a big thing to have local people call you neighbor. And so there's this way that it's graded, it's graduated, there are different levels that actually I'm becoming more and more part of the community slowly as local people accept me as part of the community. And that way of recognizing that it's not, also the tension of in and out is really important. And also in and out is not a simple boundary. It's a multi-step, multi-context boundary. And there are many subgroups. And that's what's so interesting about the idea of the pledge community having a very simple boundary initially. Did you pledge or not? But that boundary is so underspecified in all the things Mitty talked about that we have to talk about them. And so, so just recognizing those of us who work with pro-social, what does it mean to facilitate the formation of a group and not simply accept its existence by some criteria? Like, well, you pledged, so now you're in. Like, well, you may have pledged and your values may be completely out of alignment. And something I've observed, and I think other, like those who have been on the host team of some of our learning journeys have noticed that a lot of people show up and are amazed by the pro-social process. And then a few people, a very small number, show up and are so annoyed by not getting to be narcissistic jerks that they self-select out and they leave. They actually don't like that they can't dominate the conversations because we're facilitating pro-social dialogue. And so what's interesting is that just facilitating for pro-social will help to select out those who would be abusive. It's not perfect, but it's impressive how good of a job it actually does. And those of us who have been in this pro-social learning process in Earth Regenerators for a while can see how little there's abusive power within our groups, within the leadership of our groups, as we've been cultivating this capacity. And so that at least gives me confidence that we've got a good chance of getting this right, even though it's not perfect. What I want to ask right now is it's been an hour and 20 minutes, and I don't see any hands raised for questions or comments. And so I just want to ask if any of the people here in Barichara might like to share. I see David's got his hand raised again, and then Alpha. So I see Alpha could share. So David, your question, and then I'd love to hear some sharing from some of the folks who are here. David, please. Okay. Yeah, you're still muted.
Yeah, it's very good that you've made this connection to all these resources of ethnoarchaeology and archaeology, because from my experience working in South America, the indigenous people of South America, they have their own plans for the continent. Those plans have been going on for the last 3,000 to 4,000 years, and they're not finished with them. And so it's important to at least be aware of what those plans are. And so it's good that you're already connected to those people, so that the plans that you are working on to regenerate so many aspects of life in some way coordinate with that.
Yeah, I just want to say, for those who have never been in South America, like I grew up in North America, where we have a lot of indigenous people in North America, but the feeling is so different, especially in a place like Colombia. There are still 78 cultures, indigenous cultures, with fully intact language, cosmology. They're still in their territories, even after 500 years of conquest. And so the richness of direct contact with indigenous culture is so profound here. Just naming and recognizing that. So it's like you'll trip over it in the morning. It's right there. That's what's really important, to pay attention and see it. So David, thank you for bringing that up. It's super important. Alpha, I saw you lowered your hand. Is that you're not able to speak? Did you disappear?
Oh no, I can speak.
Oh, okay.
Oh wait, Chad, do you mind? Please can yeah, just a couple words about my experience here. So yeah, coming from California, walk around and see a number of the different sites here. And like the beer park is at the edge of Barichara, the town, and kind of seeing the swales and how I had to kind of like redo some of the, pull out some of the invasive grasses to allow the new plants to come in, and basically just see the series of sequence of events that has to happen, and also the water processes to redo the landscape, and these things happen at different pieces of land, and also kind of meeting some of the locals has been really cool. And so there's a group of there's a large group of Colombians and other Spanish speakers working on the land, and then there's also the Earth Regenerators that are more English speaking. They've come from other countries, and about 7 or 8 of us, and yeah, it's just been really powerful to see how the whole thing works, and also how important it is that different pieces of land have to talk to each other, and different neighbors have to talk to each other, and all that coordination, which I think Joe has said is 90% of the work is building the community, and then eco-regeneration is 10%, because basically water goes across boundaries. So you really have to have everyone coordinated across the boundaries. Because a neighbor blocking the water higher up on the land will block the water from seeping through the land to the lower piece of land, or the poop from the high lands can get through the water system to the lower pieces of land, and things like that. So yeah, so that's just a couple, I throw in a couple comments of what it's like to be here.
No, thank you for that. And I'll just ask if anyone else who is here in Barichara would like to share. I know there are a few of you who are here. Would anyone else like to share? It's okay if you don't. Tanya? Por favor.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Oh, that's a lot of information what has been happening. For me, it's been like I told Joe and Penny like 2 days ago. It's been like an emotional blender. And I go like this every day because this connects with my own mission in life, and I am trying to see how can I connect that to make sense and to contribute with this large and bigger purpose. And it doesn't matter actually if wherever I am, and right now I'm here and I want to contribute to the best of my abilities, the more I can. And I have seen first in myself, because I believe that it has to begin with one's own transformation and one's own healing. And I cannot say that it's done because I'm in constant building, and I will be forever. But this is key to see how can I be of service, you know. And it's important for me to learn how to be in community, especially because I grew up in a city, in a big city, and I didn't have this type of connection. So for me, it's been challenging, but it's also been really breathtaking to see all people gathering for the same purpose, and seeing how you make it clearer to connect all these things that seem isolated, which are not isolated, which connect. But I still think in my case, I need a little bit more clarity from, I like Steve says, I own that. I need to still clarify this, how to better contribute, to be of better service with my own mission to all this. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. And also getting to know the earth regenerators that have come here, to get to know the process, to get to know what's been happening here. And I would encourage you all to come and see with your eyes what is happening. Thanks.
Gracias, mi querida. Oh,
Gracias, Joe.
and for those who don't know, Tanya is on the team that helped manage that 2 weeks of intensive field site visits with Paco. And I don't know if you went to all of them, but you can imagine how exhausting and beautiful that is.
Almost all. I think I missed, no, all of them. But yesterday they went to Chabelas, who is a local farmer who participated in the workshop, who was not really into the fact that she has been a farmer for her whole life, And then there's this new and innovative technique that is going to help everyone to bring better conditions, you know? Like Natalia Ceci and Paco went to see her land and to just sense the feelings and acknowledge her work as a local farmer. And I think this is the type of network that we should and need to strengthen. I missed that because I had another stuff, but I heard it was beautiful, and also the visit to Felipe's site, which is going to be another challenge.
Thank you, Tanya. Are there any others who are here that might like to share? Charles and Kathy are here. Chad is here. Any of you would like to share what your experiences have been?
I'm happy to talk quickly. I guess my feeling is that I'm very new here, so understanding the context, very different ecosystem, different culture, that sort of thing. So it's been a steep learning curve for me. Incredible process, and I guess I just feel quite lucky to be involved with such amazing people. Really, I think the people are really the core of this, and building the human relations and component is what's going to make it successful. So yeah, I just feel that I've only just arrived and started to understand. So don't know if I can say too much more than that, and Joe gave an incredible overview of everything. So yeah, that's it for me, I think.
Thank you, Charles. Is there anyone else who'd like to share? We're getting to the time as well, so I'm happy to wrap it up. I guess what I would say maybe in closing for today is that it feels really important that we document what's happening as well as we can. And so having these weekly updates is really going to help. And for us to connect to things like what Benji's been doing in the Gulf of Maine in the last few weeks in his own deepening journey of that place. And what we've seen for those of us who are connected with Trisha's work in the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, that we're going to start to have a larger network where each place is so complex and so deep that you'll quickly get overwhelmed without the big picture overview. And even then, you'll probably still get overwhelmed. But what I feel is that like one of the things we're trying to do is to create a human capacity to serve the planet as a superorganism, where the planet herself is a superorganism and humans are helping to achieve the integration of river systems and mountain ranges and the flow of air and the flow of water and the movement of ocean currents and the migration of animals, all the things that have been broken by humans in the last somewhere between 500 and 8,000 years, depending on which way you want to measure it. And that what we're doing here in Barichara, as big and complex as it is for a territory, we need to be as big and complex in every territory. And so, so I just want to thank all of you for being here today to say that no one knows all the answers. I will be the first to say, I very strongly feel my human limitations in this work. And I feel the importance of what Tanya said about this emotional blender. That if you think that coming and being involved in something like this is just going to be fun and inspiring, it's hard to appreciate how much inner work we have to maintain, not just to have done before, maintain as we do this work. This is hard. And the hardest part is like what Charles said, and I guess he was quoting me, is 90% of it is working with the people. 90% of it is the human relationships. And we're all gonna mess up, but we have to do this. Our survival as a species depends on this, nothing less. That's just it's almost like false advertising to pretend we're greenwashing here. You know, it just, there's no appropriate place for that. But I'm really so grateful that we're all here together in this. And I'm looking forward to continuing the journey. And you can reach out to anyone who's here, not just me, anyone who's in Barichara, to learn more and to get on the ground clarity and confirmation of the mess, of the beauty, of all of it, of the human drama. And so just thank you for being here today. And I look forward to continuing, and I look forward to getting to know each other better as we walk these paths. So thank you, everyone.